I'll make this easier. Jamie's far less scary than I am. So
and he said I get to talk more.
I'll let him talk. You don't have anything to be scared of.
Yeah, I'm nice.
Well, I listened to that last call, and I feel like I'll be honest, a friend of mine dared me to call y'all. She said y'all were real nice. My question, I guess, was just, I don't understand how anyone could be an atheist. I mean, I live my life, I try to live my life, you know, to serve God and to be a good person. And when she said, oh, well, I talked to these atheists, I said, ow. Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know what.
Have you called the show before? Maybe?
Pardon me?
Have you called the show before?
No,
Okay.
I hadn't heard of y'all.
Oh, okay. You sound a little bit familiar. Okay, so you say that you don't understand how anyone can be an atheist. To be clear... Oh, sorry?
Go ahead.
Well, no, to be clear, when I say I am an atheist, for example, I mean there's a bunch of people saying this God exists, that God exists, Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, Vishnu, and I say I don't see it. Is that what you're saying, or you're saying people that run around and set cars on fire and attack churches? Because I've heard that as well.
Is that what you do?
No. I just wanted to clarify, because that one of those two things is a lot more unbelievable and outrageous.
But what do you mean by
atheist? Yeah.
Someone who doesn't believe in God.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you wondering, like, I was a believer before, are you wondering how I got to where I am, or would that be a helpful thing for me to tell you about?
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
Okay. So for most of my life, I believed that a God exists, that it was the God of the Bible, vaguely. I was baptized and raised as an Episcopalian.
You would...
I mean...
A high church.
Yeah. Are you what denomination are you?
Well, I heard Matt say Southern Baptist, but I'm Independent Baptist.
Oh, you heathen. No, I'm just kidding. I actually, and I'm going to let Jamie go, but I actually would occasionally go to Pentecostal churches because they had better concerts. You know, like you could go see Carmen and Petra and stuff like that.
You heathen.
But I was also, I wasn't just Southern Baptist. I was primarily Southern Baptist, but we went to other churches on occasion as well. But, yeah.
Well, yeah, you go to the gospel churches for the best music.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I brought it up because there's a whole series of jokes like, oh, you know, if you're a Baptist, but on the weekends you can be a Methodist because you want to have a drink. But if you really want to get wild, then, you know, for a weekend you're an Episcopalian because then you can dance and have a drink and, like, you know, whatever. But, no, so I was baptized and raised as an Episcopalian, right? So we would always go Easter and Christmas, but oftentimes we'd go as well, in between, you know, just regular Sundays. And... you know, recently I've had to look back and be like, how religious was I when I was, you know, religious? Like, how devout was I? Because it seems weird for me now to get into that mindset. And I found a whole series of prayers that I'd written down. And actually, after I went to Catholic high school, I started collecting rosaries because that kind of thing seemed really cool to me. So I believed devoutly, I prayed, etc. And then after a while, I bumped into some ideas and some questions. Okay, well, what is a reliable way of determining what's true, right? If someone stole the cookie from the cookie jar, how do you actually figure out who it is so that all the kids in the class will stop singing that annoying repetitive song, right? You investigate and you figure out if they've got chocolate on their hands, right? But what I found was the only time when I said, oh, okay, how do I figure out what's true? I kneel, I pray, and I think about what's going on in my head. The only time I used that method to figure out what's true was on questions of God. And that was the only method I could use. And then I thought about, okay, well, we have cars and machines, and we have, you know, amazingly, you know, fantastic planes and computers. How did we determine how, you know, electricity works, how we can design a plane that weighs, I don't know how unbelievably heavy planes are, it's like several tons, that flies through the air and carries people with it. How did we figure that out? And I realized, like, okay, well, we studied things that we could observe, and we tested them, and we improved it, and we tested them, and we improved it, and we tested them, and we improved it, right? 100 years ago, if you went into a university and you went into the science department, or you went into even mathematics, or well, literature, you'd have an extra 100 years of literature now, right? You could go back and be like, hey guys, here's this information from 100 years ago. It's all updated, it's all new. If you took information from a theology department today and you went back 100 years, you would have nothing new to tell them. Which kind of tells me about whether or not the methods being used to figure this out have evolved or developed or found anything new. And given that they contradict each other, it sort of didn't lend any credibility to, well, okay, how did you come to this conclusion that there is a God, right? Like particularly in mathematics, they can say, oh, here's why 2 + 2 = 4. Here's a giant logical proof for why 1 + 1 = 2, and it's a huge breakthrough. Oh, how do you know that this is what makes, what is it, baking soda and vinegar expand? You can test it, you can figure it out, you can look at things on a microscopic level. Nothing like that exists for God. And humans all over the world come to very, very, very different conclusions about God. Oftentimes, 2 people that go to the same church. People all over the world, oftentimes 2 people that go to the same church or live in the same house, come to very, very different conclusions about who to vote for, what their favorite movie is, what's fashionable, what's not, what the best food is. So if I'm looking at the way that people determine whether or not a God exists, it looks a lot like people trying to figure out what they like. And I know I've gone a little bit off the rails here and talked for a long period of time. But
for me, it's just, I'm much like Jamie. I'm not convinced. I am, in fact, convinced that some of them are wrong and hopefully demonstrably so. But I realize there's countless claims about different gods. They can't all be correct, but they could all be wrong. I'm not assuming that all of them are wrong. But of the many, how do I go about figuring out which, if any of these, are correct or even likely to be correct? And not to be glib, but I can probably, not off the top of my head, but I could probably come up with a list of 1,000 gods you don't believe in. And, you know, the old joke is that atheists just go one God further. But the other aspect of this is that Jews think that Christians are wrong. Christians think that Muslims are wrong. Muslims think that Hindus are wrong. You know, we are agreeing with all of them, and we are baffled that any one person could reasonably justify saying, nope, this is the right one. And the old joke, which has nothing to do with this, is that Jews don't recognize Jesus, Protestants don't recognize the Pope, and Baptists don't recognize each other in the liquor store.
Well, I mean, I know that, and I'm trying to follow y'all.
Sorry,
I
did a lot of
know
talking.
that my God is real. My grandson, when he was 2, he had a tumor on his pituitary gland. And
I'm sorry
they
to hear
didn't
that.
want to treat it. They did the MRA. MRI.
Yeah. MRI. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're
MRI.
fine. You're fine.
And they did another one 6 months later. It was the same size, and they did another one 6 months after that, and it had shrunk. And they didn't. They literally did not do any treatment. And I don't know how that's possible without God. We were all praying for him and hoping he would be well, and he's doing real well now. And it's the last time they did the MRI, it had disappeared. I mean, I've seen miracles in my own life that, how else could that be?
So, well.
Are you going to, well, which
So
which
one of the
path
things
are you
is,
gonna take?
there are parts of the story that I have difficulty believing, that they're repeatedly doing MRIs and there's no treatment. But that may be the case. But we know that cancer goes into remission.
No, he was too young. They didn't want
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying that I'm getting the second hand, so I'm trying to explain. We know that cancer goes into remission. We know that tumors shrink. You started by saying you know your God is real, and then you went to the story about your 2-year-old was a grandson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what you said about that is, I don't know how that could happen without God. That is a claim that is not, I know God did this. It's, I can't come up with any other explanation other than God. And yet there's no demonstration that there is a God, could be a God, or that a God could do this. There's a logical fallacy involved in your reasoning that is, I can't think of any other explanation, so I'm going to go with this one. And even if you could do that to say, you know, hey, my dog came in wet. I don't know how that could happen unless it was raining. Granted, I know that your neighbor could have turned a hose on it or whatever else, or could have gone swimming. But to say that I don't know how that could happen if it's not raining is not in any way confirmation that it's raining. It's a mistake in reasoning. And so people can forever talk about the anecdotes of somebody had this illness, we prayed and it got better. The problem is, how do you demonstrate that the prayer had anything to do with it, or that there was a God who answered that prayer specifically? Because we've tested intercessory prayer, and it works at the rate of chance, or worse, when people actually know they're being prayed for, it works less.
Performance anxiety,
So
probably.
these personal anecdotes of, hey, I saw this and I don't have an explanation for it, awesome. Then the correct answer is you don't have an explanation for it. But you're trying to simultaneously say, I don't have an explanation, therefore it must be God. And that's how we got to every time somebody has offered God as an explanation, and we've gone on to find the actual explanation, the answer was never God. Not once.
I don't know what you mean by intercessory prayer.
Me
know what I
praying for
thought.
Matt, like praying for another person, praying that God intercede on their behalf. Sorry, just to clarify.
So you don't think that works?
We know it doesn't work. It's been tested.
Yeah, when we've examined, we've found indicates that it does not change what happens in the world.
It doesn't matter who's praying, what God they're praying to. You could flip a coin, and it would be heads or tails, just as good an indicator as to whether or not you're going to see any improvement that somebody's prayed over.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't. That doesn't make any sense to me. I
understand that.
You.
So, I mean, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No. You were in the middle of a.
I've lost a lot of people in my life, and God has told me I'm going to meet them someday again. And my grandson Andrew is healthy today, and
so I
don't know how you can say that wasn't God.
Well, we're not saying it wasn't God. We're saying there's no reason to think it was God. That's different. But how does God tell you that you're going to meet these people again?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, this is one of the things about the language when we start talking about God, and this is not a problem with you, Manda, and I can appreciate, having at least somewhat been there, the idea that you've been convinced most of your life that someday you're going to go to heaven and you're going to be reunited with all your loved ones and everything's going to be wonderful, and the very idea that this might not be true is not just potentially terrifying, it can be almost traumatizing. And I think this is one of the disservices. Yeah, and oh gosh, I'm no good when people cry. I think this is one of the disservices.
No, I didn't. I was just thinking about my sister. I lost my sister when I was 13, and that I'd see her again, and I always believed I would.
This is one of the things where I think religions have done a disservice to all of us, because death is a natural part of life. And what religions have done, it's awful. And what religions have done is put death in a context that eases people's frustration, anxiety, mourning, by propping up a story, oh, I'll get to meet them again. Now, even if that were true, which we not only don't have good reason to think is true, there's good reason to think that there's no such thing as a soul or anything that of me that could exist anywhere else. But if instead we told people that we have no good reason to think that there's an afterlife, that gets people to focus on treating people right in this life and making the most of it and valuing it, so that when death comes, apart from instances where it's just a surprise shock, I can't imagine a parent losing a child, but it helps us to deal with it better. And if it turns out then that there's an afterlife anyway,
bonus.
Okay, it's a bonus, but at least not depending on the afterlife encourages us to do better in our interactions in the one and only life that we know we get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what did you mean that I didn't treat her right?
He wasn't. No, not you specifically. He's not saying that you didn't treat your sister right.
Yeah.
He's saying that in general, if you tell people this life that you have where you're bumping into other people on the street, that's the only life that you're going to have, that's the only life that they're going to have, and you bump into them and a person just not you, sorry. If Steve bumps into Bob and Steve cusses out Bob and they go their separate ways and Steve goes, I really shouldn't have done that. Well, when I see him in heaven, then I'll make it right.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about you. There are people who whose one of their concerns about this is, I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't tell them I love them enough. It's not about mistreating. Oh, well, I'll get to make up for that later. If you don't think you get to make up for it later, you tell people you love them more. You show that you appreciate them more. You exercise a bit more patience, or at least you can. Not everybody's going to.
Yeah, a person, not you specifically.
When after I was 13 when she died, so that was really hard. And I talked to a friend of mine was Catholic, and I went to church with her one time, and I told the Catholic priest, because I was real sad, and I told him about what happened, and my sister committed suicide. So, and he told me she was in hell. No, he didn't say it that way. He said that
he said something to those effect, which is another example of how religion
she couldn't be in paradise or whatever.
So that explains why you're not Catholic.
And I yelled at her the last time I saw her.
Yeah.
But
this is the thing, and it actually gets worse than this. It's not just about propping up what is almost certainly false hope. It fundamentally changes the way we interact with people. And yet, here's the thing. There are countless different views about an afterlife. If the Catholics are right, maybe you don't meet up. Oh, and by the way, if the Catholics are right and you're not a Catholic, you're not going to meet up with anybody anyway.
Yeah.
And so
we can hang out.
I hear from atheists who've been longtime atheists, and yet they're still concerned about fears of a hell, the hell they were indoctrinated into. And the answer that I tend to give is, how much time do you spend worrying about the hells of other religions that you weren't brought up believing in? My thing is, as an atheist, I don't have any reason to think that anything about me will survive my death. I don't think there's a soul. I don't think there's an afterlife. And I could spend my entire life sad and miserable and depressed about the fact that I'm not going to get to go be with Jesus or whoever or meet my loved ones again. And all that would do is make my life worse. If in fact this is the only life that I get, which is what the evidence points to so far, then it's in my best interest to not dwell on the way things aren't, but to focus on, as best I can, the way things are. And this is why the kind of ancient notions of some religions, I think, are poisoning our interpersonal relationships, to the point where if you don't believe what I believe, and let me take that out of you and me. There are parents who disown their children if they identify that they're an atheist. And we have to find new homes for them. I don't care if my...
I'd never do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, and good for you. If my child turned out to be a serial killer, I would say all day long that they were absolutely horrible. That they'd done horrible things and were in fact terrible people, and yet I would still love my kid. And yet, merely for disagreements about not just whether or not there is a God, but which God's the right God, which afterlife's the right life. Should men be able to have sex with each other? Should women be able to have sex with each other? Which is less objectionable generally, which I find kind of hypocritical. But all of these things that drive us apart tend to come from religious ideas that nobody can prove. Oh, well, it's just opinion, dude. Yes, but you're legislating your opinion and you're treating other people based on that opinion. Doesn't that matter? What people believe matters. And I think religions not only can't demonstrate that they're true, but I think that they've done a great deal of harm and are continuing to do so. But
does that make any sense?
Well, yeah. So I think y'all were real nice. I mean, but here, I mean, bottom line, if I believed I would never see my sister and my brother again, I don't think I could bear it. And
that's my objection to religion.
Y'all are talking logic. Y'all are talking logic, and
well, I think also we're talking humanism, because this is my objection to religion. If in fact you had grown up with the understanding that death was almost certainly the end, you would have the tools to bear it. But because religions have convinced you that this is the case, they haven't equipped you with the tools to mourn properly, to take stock of life, because I've lost people that I love, and I can continue my life. And I'm going to be sad. I'm going to miss them. I'm going to miss the interactions with them. But life is its own reward. And if I look at the time that I spend with them as the reward, then instead of focusing on some reward in an afterlife, then everything about my interactions are better.
I'm sorry, what kind of tools do you mean? I don't...
Well, oh, sorry, Amanda, finish your thought. I didn't mean to jump on...
I said, what kind of tools do you mean? I don't...
Yeah. I mean mental and emotional tools. So people deal with loss and grief in many different ways. There are some people who have a more practical view. For example, when my grandfather died, I was pleased, not because I didn't like him, but because he had been in unbelievable suffering for a long time. And I was glad that I had shared...
You didn't believe he was with his king now.
No, I think he's dead, and I think that's what all the evidence points to.
Okay.
But his situation was so bad that death was preferable to continued suffering, and I still have all those years and all those stories to look back and remember on and be happy that I was able to share part of my life with him and not have all of that diminished by not having the idea that I was going to see him again. It's like if you were told from birth till you were 18 that when you were 18 you were going to inherit $1 billion, and you get to 18 and you find out, hey, you're not going to inherit $1 billion. If you spend the rest of your life mourning the fact that you're not getting your $1 billion, the rest of your life is going to be miserable. And I can't throw away life like that because it's the only life I have.
What do you do with your love for your grandfather?
I still love my grandfather.
You know what I mean? You're missing your...
Yeah. Well, presumably he misses his... I mean, for people, and I've lost, I miss them. But really quickly, if I can circle back around to your statement, if I didn't believe that I was going to see them again, I don't think that I could bear it. Matt and I don't believe that we're going to see our loved ones that have passed away or that have died. I don't think we're going to see them again, but we have tools to bear it. There are resources for this, and even if you continue to believe in a God, the resources that are provided that help Matt and myself process this can also work for you. They don't require non-belief in a God. And given that, even if you're in a stable place where you are like, oh yes, I'll see them again, it's always possible for a person to convert or deconvert. And given that right now, you don't have a view of a way of grieving without God, and that right now you have God, and that in 5 years, rightly or wrongly, you might have a different God or no God that you believe in. I don't want you to, in 5 years, in that circumstance, not have the tools and the processes and the resources that are available to non-believers to grieve.
We're gonna have to wrap up in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you back on hold because I think the screener wanted to say something. But I'll say this: there's one tool that has benefited me, and it works when I believed in God and when I didn't. And that's this: the people that I miss, that I'm mourning, how would they want me to live my life? Would they want me to sit around and miss them, or would they want me to live life to the fullest? And even if my grandfather and he died before I was publicly an atheist, even if he fundamentally disagreed with me, and even if he turned out to be right and he's in heaven, I'm confident that what he wants for me is to not be distraught forever about his death, that I get to go on and I get to laugh and I get to experience new things. And perhaps there are new people who enter my life and they're not loved less or valued less because of the weight of his absence. He would want me perhaps to love them more. As a matter of fact, he'd probably tell me, get over it, and because that's the gruff kind of guy that he was on occasion.
His grandfather.
My grandfather would have been, hey, why are you worried about me? I live to be, in the late 70s or whatever, and you got a wife, and you need to worry about that. If you're just going to sit around, what did I teach you? I would get a lecture, and I love that, and the fact that I have those memories makes me. It doesn't change the fact that I'm sad that he's gone.
Right.
But I don't have to be miserable that he's not here. And on that note, I apologize. I'm going to put you back on hold so I think the call screener would ask.
I just want to say I didn't think I'd end up crying on the call, but thank you. No, I mean, not those kind of tears.
Yeah.
But
that's what happens.
For being real nice, and I appreciated the conversation.
Thank you so much for calling.
And
Okay, y'all take care. I'll
too.
pray for you. That was a joke.
No, I got it.